Kamini, you can start recording on the cloud, okay?
Okay.
You recording on the computer, what to do?
Sarilla, cloud.
Cloud
okay, okay. ഞാൻ ഒരു സെക്കൻഡ് കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഓക്കെ ഹോൾഡ് ചെയ്തോളൂ ഒരു മിനിറ്റ് ഓക്കെ നൗ വി ക്യാൻ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ഞാൻ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാം മീറ്റിംഗ് ഓക്കെ ഓക്കെ good afternoon everybody. Let us start the meeting, no Jamila?
Yes, go ahead.
Everything is in place. On behalf of Srimati Usha Nair, she is right now traveling, and that is why I have become the host today. And I welcome everybody, and we can start the meeting right now. And I would request Jamila ji to start the meeting and start her welcome address and introduction of Dr. Hariharan.
Thank you, Bhuvneshwari. A warm greeting to all the members of the AIWC who have joined us, and also our well-wishers. A very good evening to all of you. Today we are having the 34th session of our Literary and Cultural Forum. As you know, we have been hosting this for the last almost 3 years. And every month, first Saturday, we have had a talk on many issues. And during the last few months, we have been concentrating on the G20 countries. We have had talks on China, Japan, and Canada, Australia, and a few other countries. Today, we have a speaker with us, Dr.B. Hariharan, who is going to talk to us about Greece. When we think about Greece, one of the things that immediately comes to mind is the philosophy, the culture of Greece. Greece is a very small country of many islands, and we always think of Greece in terms of Italy, because the Romans and the Greeks were the ones who established what we would call Western civilization. And talking of Greece again is to talk about the Oracle of Delphi. One couldn't miss that, the Parthenian temple, the architectural beauty of Greece, and the myths and legends that are so much a part of Greece. The gods like Zeus, Aphrodite. We have the Poseidon, who is the god of the seas. So we think in terms of myths, legends, stories about Greece. And as I said, the philosophy of Socrates, of Plato, of Aristotle is something that really brought a new thinking into the early society of the West. When we think of Aristotle again, the theater that we have today is the gift of a great mind like that of Aristotle, who could differentiate between the actual world and the world of ideas. Socrates and a Stoic figure, Plato and his philosophy, all these are part of the great legend that Greece has given us. We also have many writers of Greece, like Homer, who wrote the first epic, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and in its wake came, of course, the works of Virgil from Rome. So you have the beginnings of theater, the beginnings of epic poetry, the beginnings of philosophy in a country like, in a small country like Greece. Greece was also a country of city-states, many city-states, which later established itself as a parliamentary democracy as late as 1975. though of course it had a democracy in various forms after the city-states came together. Not to forget the Olympiad and the Olympics that we host even today. So sports again is a gift or a legend that Greece has given us and continues to be a part of our lives. So how does one live and think without Greece? Because Greece is a Sylvan historian, in the words of John Keats, who told us that here is in his poem, The Grecian Urn, he said, "Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, Sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme." The urn itself is the symbol or the metaphor of Greece as we know today. So much of that Grecian urn story that Keats has told us remains. And Keats's own words should be our words for a takeoff on Greece, which says, "When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in the midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know." So it's on that tenor that I would like to introduce Dr.B. Hariharan, who is with us here to talk to us about Greece and celebrating life. Dr.B. Hariharan is the professor and the former head of the Institute of English. He is also the director of the Center for Canadian Studies. He was a vice president of the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute. He was also the first recipient of the Shastri Indo-Canadian Fellowship and went to the University of Manitoba, worked on his PhD thesis on Robert Crouch, and brought it out as a publication much later. He is also well known for his interest in Kathakali, and he gave us a talk on Don Quixote and Kathakali in one of our earlier forums. And he is a great translator as well. He has been able to translate many works. And I think one of his greatest contributions is the work that he has done on the theater women artists, that he has put together interviews with them, stories about these women professionals in the theater, and published it. He has many publications to his credit, and I feel very proud to introduce him because he has been like a son to me for a very, very long time. And today we would have had to listen to France, but I think as destiny would have it, here was Hari again to help me out with a talk on Greece. So we are looking forward, Hari, to this presentation on celebrating Greece and celebrating life. So over to you, Dr.B. Hariharan.
Thank you. Thank you, teacher, for those words of welcome. I don't know if I can limit it and say that these were just words of welcome. It was much more than that. Because I felt that it was an album of memories, so to speak. And memories and albums work in very interesting, very different ways. When you started off, you talked about Homer, you talked about Keats, and I was trying to recall reading Keats's poem. I tried to recall Poseidon. I tried to conjure my own image of Ulysses going on those voyages. And at one point, I also started thinking of the fact that this is part of the G20 celebrations. One wants to use that word, one can use that word. But I thought that the crux, as it were, is the idea of memory. Because celebrations are all done because we remember. And what we can do is we are all sitting in different places, connected virtually, and we try to remember things virtually. And I assume that whatever I'm going to share with you is a continuation of that extension, or this is an extended memory of how Greece has been celebrated and how it continues to celebrate itself. And that, I would say, provides a broad framework for what I thought I'll share with you. Most of the things that I really wanted to say was actually said by Professor Begum. So there could be repetitions because I think we cannot talk about Greece without talking about its architecture, about the oceans, the seas, the islands, etc. So we will be going through this, and most of the things that I would be saying would be something that all of us would have heard about at some time or the other. So I seek your indulgence, and let me begin. Let us begin the celebrations. Before we celebrate, I think we should know where we are. I thought it might be important for us to know what it is that we are celebrating. And that's why I thought we need to take a look at the map of Greece. In school, when we had to study geography, we all had to look at maps, but I'm not very sure if we had paid that kind of an attention to the map of Greece. And I must thank AIWC for giving me this chance to look once again at the map of Greece. And what it did was, I probably spent about a couple of days at least exclusively on these maps. I looked at this map and then I tried to recall the journey, the adventure, the 20 years of adventure that Odysseus had on his return journey after the siege of ransacking of Troy. And I was trying to figure out from where he would have traveled and how he would have reached Troy and the ocean and those small islands that you have there, some 600 plus islands there, and the way in which he would have been tossed from one place to the other thanks to the curse of the gods. And I realized that if we look at the map, we would discover Ithaca. I don't know if you can see it there. It's you have the north, the north, south, east, west. You have to look from that end, look up, and then on the right you will see Ithaca. If you look closely, you will see Ithaca there. So it is from there. So I was trying to figure out, imagine the journey, the trajectory of these people, and of course the whole mythology and the way in which all those people in Ithaca or in Greece collectively try to remember Apollo, remember Dionysius, remember the curses, the blessings, think about Athena, and of course, we cannot forget Penelope. We'll come to Penelope. Penelope is a very, very important figure for me in this presentation. I just wanted to place Penelope here among all these people and then offer my tribute to Penelope towards the end of this presentation, because we cannot talk about Greece without talking about Penelope. So this is the map, and you will find that down there, down south, you have this island, Crete, the Sea of Crete. And then from there, if you go up the Aegean Sea, you have this broad area called Turkey, and there you have Mytilene. It's near Lesbos. That is just north of that is where you have Troy. So from one end, you have Ulysses coming all the way and then going up there, all for another man's wife. But that takes you back to many other wedding albums, and it takes you back certainly to the wedding album of Paris's father and mother, which would take you to many other albums. The birth of Helen, Helen's sister, Clytemnestra, etc. So it's a very intricate kind of an album which has its own load of memory. So There's so much there, so much packed there. And I realized that I looked at even maps which try to trace the journey of Odysseus, those 19 years, and it was a very dizzying kind of a route map that he had taken, and they were all just on the Aegean Sea. He had not even come to Crete or to the Ionian Sea. Those 19 years, he journeyed between Turkey and Greece. He did not come even down to Crete. So it was a very fascinating thing. And in between, he finds time to go to the underworld. So it was very fascinating. So that itself is history, that itself is story, that itself becomes or is mythology. And then you start wondering, can one really distinguish between mythology and history? Don't they overlap at some time or the other? What makes up for myths? What makes up histories? So I ended up with a lot of questions for which finding answers would take I don't know how many lectures and how much more preparation on my part. So I thought I'd leave all these things hanging, and then having seen as cartographers do, I'm sure all of us would have been imagining our little Greases in our mind with this map and with whatever I've been saying. So maybe it's time for us to actually make an entry. So what we will do next is we will try, all of us who are online and perhaps those who are live streaming, we will try to enter Greece. And I think the best way to enter Greece will be to wait here at the entrance. This is the entrance to Greece and much more. As you can see, there is this cave, and on either side you have these granite sofa, come bed if you want, and the what legend tells us is that, or what myth or even history tells us is that people would come and wait there, sit there on those stones, on those slabs, wait for the oracle to come. And the oracle would come from inside the cave. And it's not that they even would have to tell the oracle, the Sibyl, their problem. The Sibyl would guess it and then would say what the solution is, and she would prophesy. So you have the prophecy there. And today I got all the photographs that I'm sharing with you online. So they all would have various copyright things there. I did not take any of these photographs. So it's a kind of a virtual tour on the one hand, and it's a verbal tour also of Greece, because that's the best that we can do. So now that we are at the entrance, there's a lot more that one can say about the Sibyl. We won't do that. We will get to know them. We'll get to see what they do. And so if all of us are ready, we will enter Greece. So I assume that we are all ready. So we'll all hold hands and then enter Greece. This is the best way to enter Greece. This is what I felt after looking up at a whole lot of material, abundant material available on Greece. So let's all enter Greece. And now that we are inside Greece, we all will be overwhelmed by the kind of architecture, as Professor Begum already did point out, by the architecture there and the ruins. But what really strikes me about the architecture is the way in which whatever the Greeks, the ancient Grecians constructed, this was always keeping in mind the geography of the region. And in that sense, I think geography is so very crucial, so very central to Greece. It could be the terrain, it could be the sea on all sides, and the material, the raw material that they used to construct these remarkable structures, the colonnades and the size, the dimension, which tells you something about the grandness of the Grecian imagination and the way in which they conceived their deities, their gods, the way in which they dream for themselves, their gods, their worships, their rituals, and the way in which they would have consecrated all these deities in different places and given them very specific functions. If we start listing all these deities, all these gods and goddesses, that would come very close to the number of gods and goddesses that we have among the Hindus. So I don't want to do that. It's a long list. And if I omit one god, then I will be cursed. So I'm not going to list any of the gods. But the ruins are, I don't want to say the ruins are remarkable, because ruins can never be remarkable. What ruins do, and I think that is what it does, what ruins do is they make for the possibility of a reconstruction. And I think that is why I think this image caught my attention. And when I talk about reconstruction, I am also talking about the way in which we reconstruct a whole lot of things by falling back to our memories. Memories of things that we generally would say things that happened to us. But here, I think we are all trying to reconstruct from the memory of things that we had heard, that we had imagined. The memory, for example, of the unseen. I think there is so much memory of the unseen when we try to talk about a place, a country, a region like Greece. And once we start reconstructing, imagining the temple of Athena, for example, from here, what is it that we would get? What will happen is, to use a comparison from photography, what we would do is we now have a shot which is used by making use of a telephoto lens. So this is kind of a long shot, and you have the telephoto lens, and you have just the ruin. And so we want more details. So what we do is we shift our perspective. We have to readjust our memories, and we go for a different kind of a shot, a panoramic shot, as it were. And this is what we get. The same Acropolis seen from the hill of the Muses. This is from another hill, so you have the panoramic shot. And you have the colonnade, you have the columns there, and the entire all the ruins are there, and you can see a whole lot of growth around the rubble there. And we start thinking about how it would have been, what the terrain would have been, and what it brings to mind. To my mind, certainly, is the idea of a pilgrimage, the way in which people would have walked to, let us say, the temple of Athena to make their offerings. And I think that journey becomes very crucial. And I think when we look at the history of Greece, it's possible to imagine how each one of them would have gone on this journey. And Kazantzakis, for example, would talk about the idea of ascent, the climb, as it were. He talks about that in his autobiography, Report to Greco. I was absolutely floored by that book when I read it. But the idea of the ascent, I think, is so central to Kazantzakis' work. And I would say that I think it's so crucial for almost all the artists that you have, all the writers that you have, that Greece ever gave birth to. So you have this remarkable panoramic view of the Acropolis, the citadel that you have there, and its current state. And what this also reminds me is that there are, I'm told there are at least 18 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Greece at present. 18 of them. It's such a small island, group of islands, 18 of them. I was not able to get photographs of all the 18, but couple of them. So I'll share with that also with you. So there's so much of history. There is so much of heritage there, which perhaps we also need to discover how to lay claim to, because it's far away. So from here, we move to the Parthenon. This is the temple of Apollo. When we talk about Apollo, sun god, it will be incomplete if we do not talk about this is the rational god. And then you have the other god who is more emotional, and that is Dionysius. So you have the rebels, and you have the whole festival of the Bacchanalia when you talk about Dionysius. So these are the ruins, and we just need to imagine how Apollo would have been worshipped. And this certainly is the land of the sun, not Japan, but Greece, in every sense of the word, is the land of the sun. Because this is these are a group of islands where I think you get sunshine, I think almost 280 days a year or something like that. It's sun is worshipped, such a strong presence. The sun, the sea, and of course the olives. Three things, and I think there's a fourth thing also, which somehow is escaping my memory. Perhaps by the end of this, that will return. So we have the Parthenon here, and you have the Apollonian tradition, where you have the rational, but reason alone will not suffice, and therefore you have the Dionysian tradition also, and which of course is celebrated certainly by the time you come to the Roman poet Ovid, especially in his Metamorphoses. And of course, we get to hear about the recasting, as it were, of the Greek mythologies, Greek deities into Roman gods and goddesses. We won't go into Rome, because I'm not very sure if we have Italy as part of the G20. I'm not very sure about that. I think Italy is also there. So maybe we would get to hear some of these narratives in a slightly modified version, adopted version as well when we look at Italy. So we have the Parthenon. From here, where do we go? From the Parthenon, we have to go to the museum. Of course, we have to go to the museum. But there are two things here. There's a reason why I wanted to show this particular visual. I was struck by this photograph, not because of the fact that there is a museum, but I was interested by this figure who's sitting there erect, and two of them who watching this. So you have the physical museum, you have a structure there with all the artifacts collected, cleaned up, curated. But I thought that it's very important to think for an instant, not just about the Parthenon Museum of brick and mortar, but the museum of the mind. This is what came to my mind when I saw this, because I tried to imagine this man sitting there, trying to construct for himself a museum of his mind, which he probably would take away from there and then live it again and again. And that is the reason why I thought I need to share this particular image, because it doesn't tell you anything else. It just tells you otherwise that there is a structure with a lot of glass and you can actually look out. But I thought this asks me to look within, to talk about the museums that, as it were, that we all would curate as we look at, as we read, as we look around, as we construct a whole lot of ideas. These are museums that we carry with us till our last breath. I thought that is the depth of an image like this. And it is for this reason that I thought I should share this photograph with everyone. And we have this remarkable temple constructed for Zeus in Athens, 2,500 years old. This is what remains of it. But what's very interesting is that this structure has worn away by the ravages of time. But the idea of Zeus, the Almighty, is there in all the stories that we continue to hear, that continue to prop up our imagination, our discussion, or the way in which we even look up the sky. If we have heard at least once what about the power of Zeus, and then you look up the sky, Zeus is there. That, I would say, is a point where Apollo and Dionysius come together. So we have reason and imagination coming together. For me, this particular image brings together these two, and that's the way in which it spoke to me, and I assume that that's the way in which it could possibly speak to many of you who have signed in. So this is Zeus, and I'll do one thing. I'll mute myself for about 10 seconds so that you all will be able to make your offering to Zeus virtually. So I assume that you all have made your offering to Zeus. We'll go on, because making an offering to Zeus, I think, is very, very important for what follows. If we don't do things properly, the way in which ritual demands of us, then the story will not be told. The story will be incomplete, because we need to take the story forward. And therefore, without offering anything to the sun god, to Zeus, we cannot reach the sanctuary of Delphi. So now we are at the sanctuary of Delphi. And there are two images there. Now, these two images are very, very important. And if we have to understand what these monoliths are, it's very important that we remember Zeus. Zeus had sent two eagles, one to the east and one to the west. And it is this point where the eagles came and met. And this place in Delphi, this is considered the navel of the world, the central point, the midpoint of the world, of the universe as we know. And it is for this reason that this place, this point which is marked off, is known as the Omphalos. It's the navel of the world. And it's the place where the two eagles released by Zeus came and met. So it has a lot of, let's say, interest in terms of story, in terms of myth, perhaps in terms of the whole idea of navigating the world, of circumventing the world. So before Christopher Columbus discovered America, setting sail from Europe, Zeus had sent two eagles. They went around the world and came to that point. So perhaps what we are doing is we are recreating this whole idea of circumnavigating the world. The two eagles did that, and they found this point, the midpoint, the navel of the world. So I find this a remarkable story, a story with remarkable potential, and to my mind, I think a whole lot of poets have talked about the idea of the Omphalos. I'm not very sure of the etymology of this word, but I remember coming across this word. That's what set me actually going after this, searching for this. I found this word Omphalos used by the writer on whom I worked for my PhD. He talks about the omphalos in one of his poems. And I started exploring this and I started going in search of this, and I found that this was a reference to Delphi. And he had not Greek ancestry, but German ancestry. So things get culturally very thick, memories get thicker and thicker. There are different layers now, multiple layers to it now. So now that we are at the sanctuary of Delphi, I'm sure you all would have paid your obeisance to Delphi, offered your sacrifice or whatever there. And so from here, let us move on. From Delphi, we need to have always again now this is the tele view. We had the close-up there, the panoramic view. We have the telephoto view now. So we have taken off from there. So from a height of let's say 15,000 feet, you look down and this is what you see. This is the sanctuary. This is the home of Apollo. So before we bid goodbye, we cannot bid goodbye to Apollo. Apollo has to bid goodbye to us. He does it every evening when the sun sets. So this is the sanctuary of Apollo. From atop, this is the telephoto vision of the home of Apollo. So from here, what we do is, now that we have seen Apollo, now that is one thing about the gods in Greece. You cannot pay obeisance to just one and say, look, I am Apollo's devotee and therefore I will pray to no one else. The gods can become very, very angry. So we said hello to Athena and then Apollo, and let us see whom we have next in line. We have to. Professor Begum did talk about Poseidon, the sea god. And you would see the sea there. And then, of course, you have sun setting there. We have to really acknowledge the presence of the sea god, because we are going on an adventure, like Odysseus himself. We need to reach home, because if we do not reach home, you will not have the next AIWC conference next time. So it's for that simple reason I thought it's very important that we have we must visit this very sacred site, because we are in a way talking about, when we talk about Greek mythology, I think we are in a way talking about the 5 elements: air, water, fire. You name all of them, all the 5, earth, you name all the 5, they are all there. There is a remarkable, to use this contemporary eco-vision, as it were. If you look at the way in which the Greeks constructed or even continue to construct their life. So we have the sea god here. And from here, of course, the abode of the gods, Mount Olympus. This is where they all live. And they continue to live there because the telltale signs are very much there. You can see Apollo there. The gods are still there. And this is the tallest mountain in that whole area. There are 52 peaks and gorges. And these are the gods of the Olympus. We have Zeus, and then 12 other main gods, and of course their children, their cousins, etc. They are all there, innumerable ones. So we just need to think of Mount Olympus, and Mount Olympus would bring to mind any number of stories, any number of narratives and sacrifices, failure to sacrifice, customs, etc. So you have this is the Mount Olympus. So having seen the mount here, it also has references, very important persons when we read Homer's epics. No point in talking about Homer's epics at this point, because that would get out of hand. So I'm not doing that. But since we have been talking about stories, we have to mention King Minos. King Minos and the labyrinth, where you have the monster Minotaur, and whoever gets into the labyrinth will struggle. Generally, no one comes out of the labyrinth. Stories are labyrinthine. And when you get inside a story, you must know how to get out of the story. Will you carry the story with you as you come out? Will the story gobble you up? And we know about the idea of the old artificer, Daedalus and son. Those Daedalus who made wings and then flew away, who escaped from the jaws of the Minotaur. So this is certainly is a protected monument, because we are talking about stories, because stories remember, and we remember because we listen to stories. And we are now into this labyrinth of memories, which we can tentatively name as Greece. I was asked to enter this labyrinth. I was not very sure again as to how I can enter this labyrinth. I now realize that entering a labyrinth can be very easy because it has only entry points. You can enter the labyrinth from anywhere, from any point. But the problem is to get out of it. Get out of it with your own story. If you are able to weave your story while you are in the labyrinth, fine, but you need to get out of that labyrinth with your woven story. And that, I think, is the story of Daedalus. And that's how you have the idea of the wings made of wax and then escaping the labyrinth. But again, we need to know what we should do with our inventions. Because if we do not know what we can do with our inventions, we will end up in a situation, or we have already ended up in a situation like that, that we get to read in the newspapers every day today. We just need to look to our neighborhood. We just need to look at the conflict or the war in Ukraine and in between Israel and Palestine. We're not talking here about right and wrong, but the labyrinth, the Minotaur that has got hold of us. And I think this story reverberates that. It brings to mind something like this. So that's why I thought it's important that we very quickly enter this labyrinth. So let's leave this labyrinth, and then we'll see what we can do with all these stories. This is the theater. This is where ancient Greek had their performances, their theater festivals. This is where imagine the tragedies of Euripides and Aeschylus and Sophocles being played, and so many others. But what's very important here is that I want to return to the opening remark of Professor Jamila Begum. She mentioned Sophocles, she mentioned Aristotle. I did not mention any philosopher so far, because stories tell, I would say, better, bigger philosophies. So I'll tell probably one story. My favorite story that I tell students back at the institute when I get a chance, when I have to teach literary theory. I imagine Aristotle coming here like so many others to watch these plays during festivals. He must have watched any number of plays, would have understood what life means, and that's where he became a philosopher. This is my hunch. And I assume that he became a philosopher by watching plays. I assume. But I'm sure of one thing. If we have a treatise called Poetics by Aristotle, I would say that happened largely because he went and watched all these plays. And he gave us this remarkable summation of what a tragedy is. He said, plot is the soul of tragedy. He did not quote anyone. I assume that he would have understood that point, that quintessential thing of what makes a play by watching those n number of plays during in festival after festival. And this is a space known for its great acoustics. There were other images that you had where even the person sitting in the very last row at one corner would hear everything audibly. And they challenge you to go there and shout, and you can hear the person talking at the very end. No mic, nothing. No amplifier, nothing. That again, I would say, has to do with the design of the space, keeping in mind the geography. Keeping in mind the geography. So I thought this is a remarkable creation where you could imagine this getting 14,000 people, packed capacity, and they could hear everything that was being said. And that's all. How else would we have had such remarkable poetry and performance? And there were no masks. Masks were invented for theater by the Romans later. That came in much later because that's a very different kind of a theater experience. But we just need to imagine for ourselves the idea of the spectacle that you have here, which is distinctly different from the idea of spectacle that you have when you look at Rome. So the theater that we have here, where you had all these remarkable performances. I don't know how much more time I have. I think I can still go on. I'm still in service, so I can keep talking. I'm not retired. So there's a reference to sports in Greece. This is the Pan-Atheniaic Stadium. This was constructed long ago. And what you have on the right side is the rebuilt stadium where they performed the modern-day Olympics first time in 1896. It was in disuse for a long time, and they were able to clear up the space and they reconstructed the whole thing. And they have a whole lot of rituals, whole lot of performances even now. So it's a very live thing. And if you even look at the name of this place, it's called Pan-Atheniaic Stadium. Athena is very much there. So if you look at contemporary Greek sensibility, you still have the goddess of wisdom. I thought that was a remarkable way in which you make a tradition your own. This, I thought, is very, very fascinating, very crucial, very important. This is the stadium. I'm not saying we are done with all the architecture, but since we talked about geography, since we talked about the ocean, I found this very interesting. The corals that turn to sand here. This is in Crete. This is the birthplace of one of my very favorite authors, Kazantzakis. This is Crete, the island of Crete. And it's very pristine. It's not like many beaches that, let us say, we have in you know where. So I don't have to talk about beaches, you know where. It's so very beautiful. So I wanted to share this. I'm sure many of you would have seen this beach and the way in which it can kind of inspire you. And the way in which you look around and you learn to look around and discover what your surroundings hold for you. This is the Aegean Sea. So on the other side, you had Troy. And the eclecticism that you have mosques, you have churches, you have the coming together of many belief systems, many cultures. The Orthodox Church, for example, the Greek Orthodox Church, one of the oldest churches in the world, coming in there, and the Ottomans coming in there. We will see how cultures actually did come together in Greece, and how that has transformed, let's say, your understanding of this place. So you have the Aegean Sea, and then you have the islands, and then this very beautiful photograph is there for us. I just wanted to mention this. And caves, remarkable again work, remarkable frame for me. Frame fit to hang the story that I've been trying to tell you all. We never know, maybe Ulysses or Odysseus himself probably did go through this passage. Maybe either he was heading towards Scylla and Charybdis, or had escaped from there, or from the Cyclops, or from the island of Circe, wherever it is. This could have been one of those passages that he had taken. And the caves look marvelous. So AIWC can think of having an expedition to Greece, and they could invite me, take me also with them. I'll be more than happy to join you all. And this again reminds you of, for me, it brought to my mind the situation in which Odysseus probably would have found himself on the island of Circe with all these walls, and how will you escape this place? It's very pristine, very beautiful. It can be very enchanting, or it is very enchanting, and it's lovely. You can go on, you can exhaust all possible adjectives that you have in the English language. And so I leave you to the adjectives, and I'm going to go to the next slide, which is very different. This is Mount Athos, renowned for many monasteries. This is on the northern part of Greece. You have it overlooking the ocean, but I would like to mention something here about the monasteries. There are monasteries right on top. There are 20 very unique Orthodox monasteries, and they are very different, very fascinating. You cannot just like that go. All these places are accessible. If you have to enter this monastery, you have to get permission. It takes about 6 months to get permission, number one. But what is more interesting, what really fascinates me about these monasteries, is that on Mount Athos, no woman is allowed to enter. No woman is allowed entry into these monasteries. Out of these 20, I think 17 of them, you have Greek monks, and the other 3, I think one is from Russia, or 2 from Russia. One is from Russia, one is from Bulgaria, and one more. I forget which one. So, that I thought is very interesting. Women are not allowed entry up these mountains. There's a reference to this mountain in Kazantzakis' autobiography as well. And I first heard about Mount Athos in a Canadian novel. And the title of that novel is The Puppeteer. The Puppeteer is a novel written by Robert Crouch, on whom I did my research. And that's where I found this reference to Athos, and I found it pretty fascinating. I found it pretty fascinating for the way in which he works in a story there. We've been talking about the Minotaur. We've been talking about the labyrinth. And we have talked about the Apollonian tradition and the Dionysian tradition. We have talked about all these gods and goddesses. Now, in that novel, it's not a Greek novel. It's an English novel written in Canada by a person of German ancestry, where the belief is that in one of these monasteries, there is a painting. There is a painting of God who is a female, not a male. That is why, that's what the novel says. That is why the authorities inside the monastery do not want any women to come there. Right? It's a story. We don't know because we have not seen this painting, if the painting is there. That is the beauty of stories. That I thought is the beauty of Mount Athos. And so having seen this, I don't know how many men are here, how many women are here, but I think if I make an application, I think I'll get access. I certainly have a beard, so I certainly can go in. So Mount Athos with those monasteries, I found that this was an amazing story. So we are talking here about amazing stories. And you have another island here. This is on the south of the Aegean Sea. This is a historical site. Now, we have pretty much covered, I must say, the architecture and the stories, etc. We were living in ancient classical Greece. But what about contemporary Greece? We have talked about UNESCO. UNESCO is very contemporary, but that is not enough. So we will do something else. Before that, before we leave to the another kind of a world, we look at this beach also on the Ionian Islands. So we have to return. We have left the Aegean and then we have come to the Ionian. That is back to the place where from where Odysseus had started his journey. So that was the reason why I thought we need to get back to the Ionian Islands. Now that we have reached the Ionian Islands, we'll do a little bit of history. 1829. Almost 200 years now since they became free. They were subjugated by the Romans, the Franks. Franks was corrupted over a period of time to what we recognize today as France. And the Franks occupied Egypt during the Fourth Crusade. So goes back, after the Romans came the Franks, Venice, the Venetians came. You still have a whole lot of architecture remaining that the Venetians had constructed. I didn't want to share any more photographs because I thought this would go on for a long time. And of course, the Ottoman Turks. The Turks have left something there in Greece, which is very, very fascinating. So I would like to conclude this presentation with that. But before that, Greece became independent in around 1829, almost 200 years ago. Now, that is the background of modern Greece. But I'll briefly share with you something about modern Greece, how modern Greece became actually modern, and the life that people have led. When we talk about celebrating life, strife, Kazantzakis would say, is the pervading law of life. And if we go back and look at all the memories that we were all trying to share, the stories that I've been talking about, strife certainly was so very crucial. And what Greece underwent subsequently after 1829 has always been this. I'm not going to read out all the things that I've written here. It went through dictatorship in the 20th century. It went through dictatorship in the 20th century. It was a member of the present EU. It was one of the 30 richest countries in the world as recently as 2008. But by 2013, there was an economic crisis. Their currency got devalued. They went through hell like what happened in Sri Lanka and what seems to be happening in Pakistan. Right? And I've titled this slide Celebrating Life. And I'm talking about economic crisis. How can we celebrate life when you have crisis? I think we need to understand what is life. There is this phrase. I think it's a Latin phrase. So teacher can correct me if it is Latin, if it is French. It's called elan vital. ELAN VITAL. Life force. Emerson talks about that. Wordsworth, I'm sure, was aware of it. Kazantzakis talks about it extensively. And if we have to talk about celebrating life, it's because of that life force. And that, I think, what I was trying to talk about in all my slides, throughout my presentation. Memory. If that life force is not there, there will be no memory. There will be no story. And so, how do we comprehend life? Life is what inspiration is to a poem. This is where the Apollonian and the Dionysian principle come together. And I use the word poem as a metronym for all kinds of cultural expressions, with its myriad expressions. It could be the epic poem, it could be theater, it could be poetry, novels, folk culture. So I'm going to I'll conclude by talking about life, by drawing your attention to one poem and one element from folk culture, and I'll wind up. So I'll talk about a poem. Teacher of literature, I couldn't help but copying a poem here. That is the only clutter that I have on the screen. Please bear with me. I'll read the poem also. I've printed it there. I don't know whether you have big screens, small screens. So I thought I'll read it out. So Penelope is back. It's titled Penelope's Despair. It wasn't that she didn't recognize him in the light from the hearth. It wasn't the beggar's rags, the disguise. No. The signs were clear. The scar on his knee, the pluck, the cunning in his eye. Frightened, her back against the wall, she searched for an excuse, a little time, so she wouldn't have to answer, give herself away. Was it for him, then, that she had used up 20 years? 20 years of waiting and dreaming for this miserable, blood-soaked, white-bearded man? She collapsed voiceless into a chair, slowly studied the slaughtered suitors on the floor as though seeing her own desires dead there. And she said, "Welcome," hearing her voice sound foreign, distant. In the corner, her loom covered the ceiling with a trellis of shadows, and all the birds she had woven with bright red thread in green foliage. Now, on this night of the return, suddenly turned ashen and black, flying low on the flat sky of a final enduring. I found it profound, Ritsu's poem. I don't have to say anything else. I don't have to say anything else about this poem. I don't have to say anything else about celebrating life. I don't have to say anything else about life, about memory, about images that we carry with us. Images of things that we have seen, of things that we have not seen. But certainly we can see Penelope's despair. I have nothing else to say about this poem. I talked about the presence of the Ottoman Turks. I talked about folklore. This is Karagiozzi. Karagiozzi comes from Turkish shadow puppetry. This is folk theater. We talked about classical Greek theater. This is folk theater that came with the Ottomans. Puppet theater came to Greece from Asia Minor. And this is a 19th century folk theater, which had two characters, Karagos and Hakivat. I think Hakivat is the pronunciation. Now, it's again very interesting to look at this you have Karagios and Karagios' friend. So you have the friend and the sidekick. It is like Prem Nazir and Adur Bhasi, Mohanlal and Jagadish Sri Kumar, Don Quixote, Sancho Panza, Hamlet, Horatio. So you have, that's why I put that double. It's very interesting. It's very, very fascinating. Now, the story of Karagiosi, this is, again, it's a typical, there's even a formula for it. It's you have the Sultan, the Ottoman Turk Sultan there, and the Sultan, the palace with the Sultan, the Vizier, and on the other side, you have a run-down, ramshackle kind of a structure where you have Karagiosi's wife and 3 sons. I'm not going into the story details, but I want to draw your attention to this figure here. You can see that his right hand is very long, longer than the left hand, and is patchwork the dress. And there are variations of this figure. This is the shadow that you have. It's now in color. They used to use camel skin, right? But now you use cardboard, and you can do a lot of colors there. It's a remarkable work to actually watch. With visual media coming up in a big way, this has actually taken a backseat. So now they have performances where they try to retell these myths and these stories using the figure of the Karagiosi. So I find this figure very interesting, and more because it talks about puppet show, and we have our own puppet theatre in Kerala. Of course, India has a very, very rich puppet tradition. Asia has a very big puppet tradition, and so from Asia Minor, this going to the Omphalos of the world, I found that very interesting. I couldn't resist myself from sharing this. So this is the figure of the Karagiosi, and then what you have here is a puppeteer. It's a very contemporary photograph. There's a big narration also I found. They use camel skin, as I said, now using cardboard. Karagiosi is hunchbacked. So he's a very cunning person, a trickster figure. So sometimes he can get away with things. Sometimes he can get beaten up. It's a comic figure. Sometimes he can be very tragic also. And so what you have here, this man here with bowler hat, he is a puppeteer. And I did talk about the puppeteer at the very beginning. And puppeteers decide how the story must unfold. The puppeteer, I would say, is very different from the president of the Immortals who ended his quote with Tess. Very different, because the puppeteer also can go wrong sometimes. It all depends on how you decide to tell the story. So you have this puppeteer and you have to be adept. You should be a master, absolute master of the story that you are telling. And that's why I thought it's very important to have the puppeteer here. So now that we have come almost to, the end of the story, but before I wind up the story, I feel terrible that I've been telling stories without giving you anything substantial. So what I thought was I'll try to give you something substantial. Of course, with a caveat, it will be virtual. So what I'll do is the last fare on the menu. This is a typical traditional Greek platter. It's called finger food. It's called meze. Now, I'm sure Professor Jamila Begum will try this and probably invite me home next week and give me this from the AIWC. So this is the dish. This is tea time. I'm sure some of you you're all sipping tea. Maybe you could relish this and then enjoy your tea. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Hari. That was such a very interesting presentation. You took us on a journey to Greece and the beautiful beaches in Greece, something that remains in one's memory. And I think, as you said, the memory lasts. It never fades away. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and taking us on a tour and ending with a platter of really rich Grecian food. I started off with a Grecian urn, and you wind it up with a platter of the Grecian food. Thank you. So now the forum is open to questions, discussion. So it's anyone who would like to say? Yes, Maithili would like to say something. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Dr. Hariharan, for taking us through all the mystery and the legend and the architecture and everything to do about Greece. You really made us go to Greece and live there for 1 hour. Now, tell me, when you did your research in Greek legends and philosophy and all that, do you find a lot of similarity with their gods and the Indian gods, like they lived with the people and they interacted with them? Is there a similarity, or is there two different?
More than similarity and dissimilarity, I think it's the celebration of the elements that you have around you that bring you to life, which is why I talked about the 5 elements, and this is what you get to see in everything that the ancient Greeks were doing, or even the practices that they have even to this day. And I would say it's much the same consciousness or understanding that I think that governs the way in which we live. We decide how we live. The way in which we, for example, would construct our houses, for example. For us, the window is very important. Why would we have the window? Why is the window very important for us? Because we would like to have the sun rays coming in. But we ensure that the water doesn't come in, but we enjoy a good rain. And we also talk about the importance of rainwater harvesting and little soil in front of our house so that the water can go in. And it's there. We worship the sun. We worship all the elements, which is what we do. For example, in literature classes, we talk about this sensibility, or whatever. And that's exactly what we do. You clean up your surroundings. You need fresh air, which is what you do. For example, if you go out and bathe in the river, that's what you do. Which is what we try to concretize in terms of idol worship. Which is what we do. So there are, I'm not very sure if similarity and dissimilarity would still be the frame of reference for us, but we learn to live as a part of our surroundings. And whatever we do in the process, I think, calcify over a period of time. And we give them very specific names. And then we refuse to understand that there is calcium there, which is good for our bones. And we fight over it.
Actually, to add to what Hari just said, while he was talking about the many gods and goddesses there, if you look at the figure, the statues, the marble figures, a lot of them, I think, resemble some of our ancient cultural artifacts, particularly the way in which women are carved, the sculptures of women. And Athena as a very, a very strong character. And Athena, as you said, is the daughter of Zeus. And naturally, Zeus was the sun god. And Athena was supposed to have been born from him. That's the story, the legend goes like that. So Athena represents victory from his born. So many myths, I think, in some way or other has connections. And as you said, a Canadian writer writing about Greece and the mounds there seems to be some connection that sort of networks all human imagination. And that's what is...
That's why I said that's why I talked about memory. That's why I talked about memory. Because there are ways in which we relate and we remember things that we have not even seen. How many of us have seen God? And yet we imagine God in different ways. We give gods different shapes, different forms, different size. But Ganesha, for example, is a beautiful example. There is a human conception of God, an ant would also will have a god, and the ant will conceive of God in his or her image. We cannot think outside of images, I think. Even if I am a person who cannot see, I would still have my image of a power. Right? Because it's a question of seeing. How do we see? We see not with our eyes, but we see with our inner eye. And all worship, if you become aware of all the 5 elements, you are talking about the opening of the inner eye, which is what Wordsworth talks about in his Immortality Ode.
This is what Plato talked about in his Republic and the cave. Remember?
It's the opening of the inner eye.
Yeah.
In the Immortality Ode, to see and then of course Blake and of course Wordsworth, to see the world in a grain of sand, heaven in a wildflower, old infinity in the palm of your hands, and eternity in an hour. What else is it? There is something remarkable about those images that I saw, and thanks to you, I was literally pouring into the net, trying to see what kind of images would it throw up.
Anyone else would like to ask something?
Kuljit Kaur ma'am is there, Bhuvaneshwari. Kuljit Kaur ma'am is there. We can ask her to.
Jamila ji, you gave a wonderful presentation, summed up the whole history of Greece, literary history, which brought us back to the college days, Homer's Iliad, Aristotle's Poetics and all. It was beautiful, wonderful. And Mr. Hariharan, I say that your presentation is the most beautiful and story-like telling presentation which I have ever heard about any of the countries who are presented in this program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamila ji, always. You were too good. Too good. Thank you.
Can I ask something? Hariharan?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yours was a very beautiful presentation. I am not a literature student, so I couldn't understand a few things. But you've taken me to Greece, and it is in my bucket list. Maybe Jamila, myself, and Bhuvaneshwari will go to Greece and go around to see the structures there.
Take me with you.
You can also come with us. Okay.
Yeah.
So we wish to go to Greece and see. And you.
Kamini, I am.
Yeah, Madam Kuljit ji also is wanting to come with us.
That he can explain everything in detail over there.
Yeah, I know. So I was thinking about, like you have talked about 20 unique, I'll tell you one second. 18 UNESCO sites. I didn't even know there were 18 UNESCO sites, It's really a revelation. And you've talked about, but I was just wondering about the 20 unique Orthodox monasteries. Why women are not allowed to go inside? Do you have any idea about it?
That's a very old tradition, and monasteries would have their own rules, and they live the kind of life that they live. That's a very, very austere kind of a life, very secluded, and that's what actually describes the monastery, and that's why it is so very distinct, very different from the other monasteries. It's very distinct. It's again, it has to also to do with the kind of practices that you have inside those monasteries, whatever it is that they would have, and the regimen that they have.
But in India also, if you go to Ladakh and all, it's the same thing, but women are allowed to enter the monasteries.
It has nothing to do with what's the gender question, or the way in which we generally talk about this, and we would say, look, a feminist would not agree with it. Why is it? Why can't women go? I don't think that question makes any sense.
But just to add to what you said, Hari, Greece always had a very patriarchal kind of setup. When men got the right to vote, women did not get the right to vote earlier on. Then for the Olympics, women were not allowed to participate in certain games. So there was always a kind of restriction for women.
Can you think of a society which is not patriarchal?
No, I say.
What I've always felt is the moment we bring in the bugbear of patriarchy, I think if it is not patriarchy, some other archy would be there.
Yes, very right.
So I would say
Very right.
that because we had patriarchy, we have all this discussion, we have had something like feminism, we have had gender studies, we had such a rich culture, such a rich heritage. And when we talk about culture, it need not necessarily answer all our questions. What it can do is it can make us think about this and perhaps wonder about certain things for which perhaps we may not have an answer. Maybe 500 years down the line, somebody probably may come up with a thought, not even an answer. We think we have an answer. It is like that Frost poem.
Yeah, all this was in the very past, like right to vote, participation in games, things like that. But I don't think there are any restrictions now, as far as I know.
Yeah, even now, yes. Restrictions are even today. That's why I said even today, if you want to go there, you have to get permission. There's a very distinct law unto themselves, and then what they have done is they have tried to maintain it. They have not tried to transgress upon it and then violate it. I think that's very important. I think we are talking here about how we can claim a heritage, something as our heritage. How do we make something a heritage? How do we claim that this is heritage? How do we make something our own? I think there is this very big, this is the question, this is what we need to address. And unfortunately, we generally do not address this.
We don't address it.
Because it's not a building. When we talk about heritage, it's not even a building. There is something else.
And actually the buildings the photographs that you showed us, some of those huge buildings, it should have been so great in the past, the grandeur of those buildings now in rubles as sort of, and I understand it is the acid rain that they say was the cause for the destruction of most of these.
Multiple causes were there. But
here you're talking about Santorini is one of the most beautiful places, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
I want to come back to the heritage thing, because we just need to this is online available for everyone. But I think Kerala generally, people in Kerala generally, I think are a little bit too cynical about the idea of heritage. The way in which we look at not just monuments, but look at an area where you have some of these historically very, very important, historically or even culturally important sites. How do we maintain them? How do we have we learned how to respect some of these sites? I think there is this very, very important question. And I think I personally feel that could be one reason why you are discussing Greece today. Or all the other countries. There are things that we can learn from them.
Yes, so much has been lost in the course of time.
Because space doesn't have memory. We try to have that memory by recreating that space. Every time we pass this place, we recreate, we construct, we create that memory for us. And then we have to discover how that can actually be shared with somebody else. Because otherwise you will not have heritage.
I think Bhuneshwari wants to ask something.
Thank you, Hariharan. Thank you, Dr. Hariharan.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, it was a wonderful presentation. You took us, we all waited. The way in which you made the presentation was really unique. We waited at the gate to be taken inside, and then we could make offerings to several gods. The way in which it was presented was very interesting. And the pictures were really like lifelike. We could have a virtual tour. And for me today, it was Ushaji is not there, and that's why we had a lot of responsibility. And thank God, everything went fine, and your presentation goes smoothly. And one or two points which I loved was the entering of labyrinth and not coming out. The way you compare it with the war which is going on. You can enter, but how to get out, it's very difficult. That point is very.
We have the Minotaur, the labyrinth story, and we have, of course, the Abhimanyu story. You enter the Padma Vyuham, but you don't know how to get out of it because you are not trained to know this.
So, anyways, we got out of it, and we talked about the women not allowed to enter the monasteries. That's also I wanted some elaboration on, but of course we have spoken about it. And is it? I was wondering whether it is because of the patriarchal society or some reasons you had told, but I was not sure. I did not understand it completely. The reason why they are. The reason why they are not allowed women. So
the reason why?
The women are not allowed in the monastery. That part I missed out. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that is that I assume is the regiment that they have, and the kind of, it's a monastic order. There are these orders, and then you go by what the order tells you to do, and it's the life of the recluse that they have, and you do not have the kind of facilities or whatever that is the rest of the country. They are a small community unto themselves.
Okay.
Right. So they are governed separately. The governance there is very distinct. So that I thought was very fascinating.
Is this still a practice?
Still there, yes. Yeah.
Even here also we have, in India also we have such places.
Yeah. We have temples, for example, places in India where the temple will be open 3 days a year. There's one temple in Hassan where I was working. I was there for 10 years. There's a place called Hasanamba Temple. So this temple is open for, I think, 5 days or something a year. And you have women coming in. So it's women who come there, and then they do the puja and everything, and they have the sacrifice or whatever, the Devi temple, and it's closed. So you have some of these rituals. If you look at the tradition, doesn't mean that it is 100 years old or 500 years old. But these are certain practices that you think defines, let us say, the quality of the practice there. So and this deity probably will have a sister, and the sister can be very naughty, can be mischievous, and you will have a tradition of the sister coming in there and then poking her nose up to her and going back. You cannot find fault with it. Well, if there's a practice, and what it does is, it would enable an economy, it would enable a gathering of people who would want to see it. And so why not break it? Why not have everyone coming in? Then you will have a different practice altogether, which is already there.
When you visited the monastery, did you see that female deity also over there?
Pardon me?
When you visited those monasteries, you said, no, there is a female deity, that's why they don't permit the women. Did you see the deity over there? Female deity.
In Hassan. I think she's referring to in Hassan. Am I right, Kuljit?
Yes, Chief.
Oh, because it's very near the old Hassan bus stand. It's called Hasanamba Temple.
Have you seen? She's asking. Have you
seen?
Yeah.
Are men allowed to see?
Yes, I remember during the festival it was crowded. I saw it from a distance. I said, "My God, I'm not going there."
Okay.
It was very crowded.
You can see that. So you saw the deity, yes.
Yeah, I saw that. Hasanamba.
Anyone else would like to ask them something? Srikala? You're muted. You need to unmute.
Muted. It's still muted. Yeah.
You're still muted. Go down to the.
Now it is you are unmuted. Yeah.
Yes.
I would like to say it was a very colorful presentation, Dr. Hari. You took us to the ruins, the architecture, the beautiful temples and beaches and monasteries and caves. It was really wonderful. And your way of presentation was also quite unique. Thank you. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I could hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So if no one else has anything to say.
When we see next
Well-
any ruins, we will remember that it is, yes, there is a possibility of reconstruction.
Yes, in our imagination.
Yeah.
In Indian puppets, you have these shadow puppets where they use leather to make puppets for shadow puppets.
Shadow puppets?
They use leather.
No, earlier, traditionally, it is camel leather.
Ah.
Now, what has happened is they use cardboard. They use paper, thick
Here
paper.
I'm talking here, even now we
Ah.
have shadow puppets.
Oh, yeah. No, there are different materials we use
Right.
for puppet show. One is leather. You have leather puppetry. For example, in Kerala, you have leather, and then you have for Kathakali, you have these miniature of these forms. Kolpava Kutu, you have it in, for example, in Palakkad. You have Pavakutu where they present Ramayana story.
Ah.
You have puppet tradition in South Asia and not
Yes.
Vietnam, Malaysia, that area. You have where they present the Ramayana story.
Yeah.
There are different materials that are used for this for portraying this. So you have globe puppetry, then shadow. This is globe. Kathakali, for example, is globe puppetry. Because you have the fingers and then you do it with your fingers.
So
But you don't reveal your fingers. I think that is the mastery of the puppeteer. That is the puppet master.
Yes.
So a good storyteller will be a good puppet master. Will be a good puppeteer. Should never reveal your
So I
hand.
think it's time to say bye to Dr. Hariharan, the storyteller who actually took us through all the stories of these. Thank you so much, Dr. Hari, for being here with us and talking to us about Greece. I take this opportunity also to thank all the AIWC members who have gathered here. And a big thanks to Usha, to Bhuneshwari, who was able to make active this platform for us today. A big thank you to Bhuneshwari for being here to help us out. Also, Usha, who is not here at the moment. I would also like to place on record my thanks to AIWC for giving me this opportunity to keep on holding on to this literary and cultural forum and making it lively and appealing to all its members. So thank you very much to all of you for being here. And a big thanks to Hari, who has taken us into the labyrinth, and we are all in that labyrinth. I don't know how we will get out. So let's
That's because we
rest
have
of our time trying to get out of the labyrinth.
Now.
Yes.
She taught me how to tell these stories because I did my research with her. So you are the bigger storyteller there. Thank you very much.
We are all storytellers.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all so much. So I think we can now close the meeting, Bhuneshwari.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you.
now, can we end the meeting now? Kaminiji, thank you for recording it.
Shall I stop recording?
Yeah, you can stop recording, and I'm going to end the meeting